Hi, and welcome back to another episode of BootUP. I'm joined this week by two awesome startups, OpenVPN and OpenToken. But before we get started, let's go around and introduce ourselves. You guys know me. I'm Nikki, technical evangelist at AWS.
I'm Nick Walsh. I'm also one of Nikki's coworkers on the technical evangelism team, and back again to co-host this awesome episode.
Francis Dinha, co-founder and CEO of OpenVPN.
I'm Daniel Chen. I'm a CEO and founder of OpenToken.
My name's Michael Grazik. I'm the CTO and co-founder of OpenToken.
So tell us a little bit about what you guys each do. What does OpenVPN do and what does OpenToken do?
Well, we are basically an open source company providing VPN software. VPN stands for Virtual Private Network Software, which is basically an open source. And the idea of making a security software like VPN open source is to provide transparency. So we do allow people to deploy our open source, basically, in all kind of different use case, different applications. But at the same time, we do have our commercial version of OpenVPN as well, both as a software that can be deployed on Amazon Cloud, AWS, but also as a service as well on the cloud.
So you sell to the consumer and to the business?
We do sell to the consumer and we sell to the business as well. We can get into the details of that more.
Yes, we will definitely dive in before we do.
So OpenToken's originally it was a fundraising platform for crypto companies. This came around 2017 when ICOs were first starting to get a lot of traction.
Yep.
And despite all of the potential concerns around the space, these guys are raising too much money. A lot of these projects outright scams. There were two things that I thought were really interesting in this movement. Number one was liquidity, right? So if anybody at a startup or anybody's been at a startup, they can kind of understand what it feels like to be locked up in equity for a very long time.
Yep.
The other part was access, right? So bringing access to these other kinds of alternative asset classes to people outside of Silicon Valley, to investors outside of Silicon Valley. So that was those are two things that we were really interested in early on. We built OpenToken as a way for people to get open access to these kinds of things. Unsurprisingly, the crypto space is kind of in a lull at the moment, so we're working on another project that Michael can tell us a little bit more about.
Yeah, we're
So
building.
there's been a pivot.
Yeah, sort of pivoted to this other sort of related thing, and we can maybe talk about the path of how we got from where we were to where we are now. But now we're mainly focusing on user acquisition for this new product, which is a sort of a game/gambling website, which feels a lot like similar projects in the cryptocurrency space, but we think that we have a kind of a unique take on it. So
This is interesting.
it's called Hunches. Yeah, and we can talk more about Hunches later.
So originally, you guys were helping fundraise essentially blockchain companies and making sure that when they were using an ICO to fundraise, they were able to actually turn that money into cash or coin into cash and actually use it. And now you're focused on more of like a gambling company. I'm assuming that it's built
okay,
on
let's be more specific there because I think gambling's a strong word to use. So I don't know how familiar you guys are with prediction markets. You've probably heard of companies like Augur, or at the very least Predictit, for example, predicting the outcome of the 2016 election or something like that.
Yeah.
So what we're building is something in a very similar space where people are incentivized to place effectively orders. They're not in our construction, but these are orders that would potentially go in an order book, and in a traditional prediction market, they would match, and you'd get to a market price, which would approximately predict what the crowd thinks is going to happen, right? So maybe they think Trump's going to have like a 40% chance of getting elected, or they might think Brexit has a 90% chance of not happening.
With coin.
Yeah, with any kind of currency.
Got it.
It's just it happens to be easier with crypto,
Right.
just because it's a lot easier to integrate. But
And is this like going on the Ethereum network or?
The entire system is like off-chain, and this is part of our secret sauce. Is that it's a lot easier to bootstrap something in a database than it is to bootstrap it on top of Ethereum. So I think
Exactly.
a path that a lot of crypto companies are taking now, and which is like more acceptable, is to build a centralized version of something and then talk about sort of how you're going to decentralize it, or find the aspects of it that benefit the most from decentralization, and then talk about how you're going to decentralize those, or actually do it. So rather than build the thing decentralized first and find clever ways to make it usable and fast, we want to build something that's usable and fast from the beginning, and maybe find some clever ways to decentralize it.
Right, to handle things like throughput, which is typically could be slower if you build it on top of the Ethereum network.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's much, much slower right now. And the infrastructure, as you know, you've built smart contracts on the Ethereum network.
Yep.
It just isn't there yet to kind of handle the throughput that,
No.
We'd want.
And there's just
to be
some
able to handle.
I think it's difficult to also, as a developer, code a smart contract that runs on the blockchain because there's no room for error. And as you know, we are all human. And so you have to, make sure it's extensively tested before you put it out there because one flaw in your smart contract and you're in big trouble.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great
Big
point. Yeah, I mean, that's not to say that we won't do some form of decentralization in the future, but at the moment, the priority is, making sure that the project has legs. As Michael said, user testing, try to find, quote unquote, product market fit, all of those things.
Right.
Yeah, and so these are all really effective ways of making sure your MVP gets to market, that you actually are going to get to test it and make these improvements, right?
Exactly. So that's the priority for us at the moment.
Yeah, so we heard a little bit about OpenToken's sort of MVP process and how they pivoted to that. Francis, that OpenVPN, how did that MVP process start out? You mentioned that you're open source. Was that
Yes.
sort of the core model from day one? How did that evolve?
Yeah, that was the core model from day one, basically, when it was started as a project by James Yunan, who is the co-founder of the company as well. So initially the idea wasn't really, there was no business model. It was pretty much, the VPN traditionally used to be a hardware-based solution, basically. You get a box, you plug it into your corporate network or for all the remote access. And but the idea there was, well, how can we take this and make it more of an open source? You can run it on any kind of Linux platform, but also run it on a different platform when it comes to Windows, to Mac, to all that. So it started as an open source project. And then when I met James, I say, okay, I've got an idea actually right now. Let's take this to the next level, basically. Put it on the cloud and start really offering like a service or as a software. And then we start building the management layers and the UI and then it became way more complicated because we were looking at our competitions in the market and looking at Cisco, looking at Juniper and saying, okay, how are we going to be competing against those people? So that's how we basically started the company, basically, as an open source. Oh, that was a very long time ago. When James started, that was in 2003, 2004.
Wow.
I came in, I started actually at 2005. And then I brought him in. But we bootstrapped the whole thing. So we finished our first commercial product by 2009, 2010, when we launched it. I was able to raise some capital myself and also from some few friends, angel investor, about $1.2 million. That's all we raised pretty much. And we've been able to bootstrap it without any venture capitalists, basically.
Since then?
Since then, yeah.
Wow.
So we do have OpenVPN Access Server, which is really the commercial version that runs on AWS. It is on the marketplace, and it's last year we just the growth of it was about 150%. So we're growing north 100% every year, basically,
wow.
which is pretty nice, right? So that's the part of, and there are a lot of use cases, basically. The idea of the VPN really there to insulate your data. If you want to run your data in VPC, the virtual private cloud, well, everything now is becoming remote access, so it's on the cloud, right?
Yep.
So you need VPN in order to access that. So that's where basically our customer, they use VPN for
So if we're
remote
taking a
access.
step back, VPC, he said, is a virtual private cloud.
Yes.
That's where you're going to run all of your AWS resources and instances
Yes.
inside the VPC. So I wanted to extend this VPC to, say, another cloud's
Another
VPC,
cloud provider or even to the
my
end devices.
own VPN, like my own corporate VPN
That's
or
correct.
on-premise. I can use OpenVPN.
You can use OpenVPN, but also you want to extend remote access as well. You don't want to
okay.
extend remote access because everybody becomes a remote access. You don't want to extend it all the way to actually your premise. What you want to do is you want to also provide access control at the VPC level. So everything becomes virtual. So basically your endpoints, whether it's a mobile device, whether it's a laptop, it has a VPN, and it's all connected through the VPC. So the idea is you aggregate that, and then you apply your policy in terms of the access control, in terms of authentication, whether you have second factor authentications and all these level of security. So you can provide a way, way better and more secure framework for your business as well. So that's the idea. Then we have also a product called Private Tunnel, which is, again, it's based on OpenVPN, more for the consumer. I mean, as a name, Private Tunnel, basically, privatetunnel.com, and we have OpenVPN.
Yeah, my dad uses it.
He uses Private Tunnel, okay. So, I mean, there are different use cases. Private Tunnel is mostly, basically, if you want to hide your IP, you want to encrypt all your data. So we do have servers in the US, we have in Europe, we have actually in Japan, we have in a number of countries, right? So that's one of the use cases, that you want to encrypt everything. At the same time, you want to hide your IP address, because you don't want to be subject to DDoS attacks, because there's a lot of things going out there.
Right.
At the same time, what we've done, we've actually deployed a threat management solution also around our cloud. So when you connect to us, we act like a kind of a service provider for you, and an ISP, Internet Service Provider. But the difference is we have the entire UTM, because if you're a consumer, you're not connecting to your VPN. Traditional,
right.
With a VPN, they already have UTM, Unified Threat Management. That's what stands, the firewalling. So they protect you against a lot of malware. But the consumers are not protected by the ISPs. So when you connect to Private Tunnel, we take care of that, basically. We typically have 0-day threat, meaning every day we detect hundreds of thousands of threats out there. We have the ecosystem together with the other partners as well, and we apply with that. So a lot of malwares would be blocked. So that's another use case for you. The third use case, go ahead. If you
No, keep going.
So there's another use case is actually, it's basically connecting to the free world. So if you are in Japan, that's where I came from, Iraq.
Yeah.
So I was born in Iraq, so I know how a suppressive regime was. I say, wow, would be interesting. So now we've got people in these suppressive regime like Iraq or Iran or China. They don't allow you to access content like Facebook, like Twitter. So VPN will allow you to tunnel all the information and appear like you are in the US.
Yep.
So you can change your presence.
That's why my dad uses it.
So I mean, there are a number of use cases. So it's even the consumer market is actually growing also rapidly.
I was going to ask about the consumer market. I was going to ask you both, like, how do you see the security space moving forward? And do you feel like more and more consumers will start using a VPN instead of just connecting to regular ISP?
Okay, so as far as consumer, there are different views about a VPN, right? So there are some are using VPN for the purpose of hacking, for the purpose of really spamming, for the purpose of, and sometimes even getting access to an illegal content like torrenting. Mm-hmm. We're not in that space, right? So there's a lot of companies who are incorporated outside the U.S. to kind of saying, oh, we are not going to be in the U.S. because we have to comply with the regulations and the laws of copyrights and all that, so we're going to stay out of the U.S., right? I don't think you can trust companies like that. We are basically in the U.S. and we are more providing a security product. So we are more in the security base, and we do actually block torrenting, because torrenting, it's kind of can be a disaster for you as a consumer if you don't know what you're doing. If you know what you're doing about torrenting, then that's fine. But if you end up with a malware, can you imagine what's going to happen with peer-to-peer communications? Peer-to-peer communications will allow these hackers to actually put some content you may not like in your computers. You're going to be sharing this content with other people without you're being aware of it. It's very, very dangerous, So that's why we stayed away from that. So you have to be, so the consumer market is going to be very interesting. I really believe eventually you're going to have VPN, a credible VPN provider who do provide that kind of cloud security with the ecosystem that they have, with 0-day threat management and all that. That's very valuable for the consumers, basically, but not for accessing content or accessing Netflix when I'm traveling and things like that, So that's really, I see the use case for the consumer. But there are other use cases as well. Of course, for businesses, it's a whole different story. We can elaborate on that as well.
Definitely. So those are lots of consumer-centric sort of use cases. You just described three major ones. But especially with your pivot open token, how do you see the story of users using your product, and how do you incorporate them essentially into your design philosophy for your product?
Yeah, I think that's a fair question. I mean, we're still in the user discovery phase right now, and we're getting feedback from a lot of different users who are using it in different ways. So right now, it's just like incorporating that feedback and using that to make product decisions based on, for example, whether they expect it to be, a gambling site, which, fortunately for me personally, I'm not a fan of gambling, so, not many people intend to use it in that way, so we don't do our design based on that. We try to have a different kind of user experience. More of them kind of see it more like a game. So they see it as like a simple way to just, set predictions on what they think will happen, and then they get some feedback when the events actually do or don't happen, and then they come back, and that's kind of the cycle there. So just based on what users are telling us, then we can kind of go back and rethink the design, make sure it conforms to their expectations.
Yeah, and in the user discovery phase, I'd imagine you're constantly changing the product. Small tweaks to the UI, completely new features. And Francis mentioned a lot of benefits of the cloud for distribution and a lot of the security benefits. But I'd imagine that in the user discovery phase, the agility the cloud provides you is something that's immensely valuable. Could you speak a little maybe to that and how cloud helps you with your product iteration?
Yeah, sure. At this point, where the site is small enough where we're not, spinning up, multiple parallel web servers on the fly to deal with increased demand. But Amazon makes it really easy to do a bunch of other stuff that is really convenient. Like for example, we were using Gmail to send email, and Gmail has some pretty low limits on how many emails you can send, because it's not an email service, it's like a personal email account. And so we switched to using Amazon's email service, SNS.
SES?
SES, yeah, SES. Well, there's SES, SNS, and SQS, which all together make a really nice email service. So when we started doing this, I haven't even touched the thing in months because it works great. So when we started sending out a lot more marketing email and had more users who we had to contact frequently, this made it a lot easier to say yes to pretty much any kind of email that we wanted to send. I'm not nearly as worried about spam and things like that. So as far as marketing techniques, that's been a huge help. We also switched to using RDS, which is the relational database service. It's a sort of turnkey Postgres in the cloud, and there's other options besides Postgres. But this one is great for scaling, because although we don't have to scale our web services, a database that's running on a T2 or something on Amazon is not going to handle any traffic, and it's great for starting out and doing development on your own. But as soon as you get 100 people on your website at a time, it's really nice to be able to instantly upgrade the database and just notice immediately their request latency go down. So I guess my main experience with adapting the product is as soon as we get more users, I know immediately what parameters to tune to make the site more responsive, and I know exactly what dimensions to expand on to try new possibilities, like sending more emails, for example.
Yeah.
So what does your AWS architecture look like today? You mentioned a little bit about RDS and SES, but what does it look like today, and how has it evolved over time?
Yeah, so we have the core of the site on Heroku, which does kind of nice UI stuff on top of AWS. So everything's deployed in AWS, and they tell you a lot of inner workings of where you ought to deploy your stuff, because obviously I want my database to be in the same data center as my web servers. So we have, I would say, just the web server in Heroku, and then everything else is directly on either EC2 instances or one of these services like SES. So I mean, roughly speaking, we have a front end which is in React, and then this thing talks to some web servers that are written in Django and deployed through Heroku, which runs on Amazon. And then each of these things talks through some queue service to various other workers that are running on EC2 instances. And these things are basically just shell scripts that run in a loop and read jobs from the queue and then execute them. Some of the jobs are email, in which case they basically send an email to SES, and which simultaneously creates a notification on delivery, which is through this SNS thing. And then there's this queue service also, which you can use to report that you're done with the email so that you don't send it twice or something. So there's this loop off to the side for email, which consists process of sending and receiving notifications about the email. And then, of course, all of these pieces talk through the database, which we use for both storage and consistency. So anytime, for example, you want to make sure that two events are like sequenced with respect to one another, you do something through the database. Or if you want to make sure that some request is like logged durably, and it's something that you want to be able to like refer to relationally, then that goes through RDS. And then we also have like logs and stuff, but that's not directly on AWS. It's just stuff running on EC2 instances.
Got it. Interesting. And how about you?
Oh, AWS, obviously, we use it in different aspects. So one is, obviously, we have two websites, OpenVPN and Private Tunnel. We do use that, AWS EC2, but also we use Fargate as well to basically distribute the load. So we don't have to worry about hardware and the deployment of the service. So we do use Fargate. So that's one aspect of basically AWS. Another aspect, because we have our product in the marketplace as well, so we do have our customers, and we have thousands and thousands of these instances being launched with our product.
Just from the AWS marketplace?
From AWS marketplace, actually. They're running. I mean, they're growing just every day. We're seeing new instances. It's growing and just growing.
When did you start putting your product in the AWS marketplace, and how much has it grown since that time?
I think we started about, I would say, 3 years ago.
3 years ago.
And it's been growing 100% every year.
100% every year?
Every year.
Wow.
Growing crazy. Yeah. So that's a pretty good, way better growth than Azure. So I was saying, well, why is this? I never understood this until I look at the number. Why in the heck that Amazon is really growing faster, way faster than Azure. Azure is like kind of up and down, not trying to downplay Azure, obviously. And then I realized, well, because of our product, the server side is really all on Linux. And it made sense.
Ah, yes.
Well, Azure is really more Windows kind of, mostly customers who goes to Azure, they're really more Windows centric. They're more Windows oriented. So, but then now we launched just about 6 months ago on Google, and we're seeing also the same growth as AWS as well there, because it's a much more Linux-based, basically, server. So that's the second use case we have. Another use case, because we are actually deploying this for the consumers, and we have our own, basically, server running. Those servers are dedicated server in different data centers, because we don't want to move the data actually across Amazon. That's very, very expensive for us. However, for the businesses, they launched on Amazon, no problem.
Right.
But for our data, is actually, we still believe that dedicated server are way more cost effective. But the control plane, all the management runs on AWS. There we use Fargate again for basically distributing. We used RDS for the database. We use actually S3 alongside with the SNS as well for actually distributing the basically the notification and the database more in a distributed way and across the globe. So we use all these different type. Of course, we use the EC2 as well, but right now we're moving everything to Fargate, to basically do better load balancing. Yeah, all container. But the other thing is, what we are doing, we're building right now around AWS is our next generation of VPN. We're reinventing VPN in a way. So the next generation is really is cloud VPN. Is cloud OpenVPN. So what that means, basically, it means that you can interconnect your applications. You can go all the way to the containers. You can go all the way to physical server. You can go all the way to your network and actually define policies and access control and building and constructing your service on the fly, on demand.
Wow.
That's where we are. So we're kind of debating this, the data, because there is the data plane and there's the control plane. Definitely the control plane is going to be all running on AWS and Amazon and all that. The data plane is kind of a little bit, we're looking at it, okay, we're going to continue right now with dedicated server but those servers are going to be somehow very close in terms of geo to the Amazon's regions as well. So we're going to make them very close to Amazon. So we're very aggressive and very bullish about AWS.
It's another great success story from the AWS marketplace, but I think there are a lot of startups out there that they see the value in it, but they just don't know where to get started with it. Like, how was your process about getting started distributing OpenVPN on the marketplace? Well,
we started very simple. Initially we started with obviously dedicated server, which basically was a data center, right? But that was sucked because you couldn't scale, right? Then we moved to EC2. And we say, okay, EC2 is great and all that. And even actually our database, MySQL, was all run in EC2. Then RDS came in and said, oh, okay, now we can go RDS. Then Lambda came in and say, oh, okay, then MySQL say, well, we can do a lot of things in Lambda. Certain things we can do in Lambda. So what you have to do, you have to start gradually and building that. Don't go into basically trying to build everything at once, right? Because there are a lot of services out there. So it depends exactly what is the product, what is the application you're providing, and what kind of services you're going to need, and what is the most cost effective of doing it. So, so I wouldn't mind you start small, because some people start very big and they think they're going to scale overnight. That's not going to happen, basically. It's going to take time before you scale to that level.
Yeah.
I would say so. Running a startup is like really difficult. I mean, like I know I've been there. So how do you guys celebrate like the wins, and how do you get through the tough times? Like what do you have a ritual that you do, or a prop that helps you get through the tough times, like a teddy bear?
Do you pray? I pray every day.
Yeah, you do.
There you go. That's one thing.
Food when you're happy and different food when you're sad.
You guys celebrate with food.
Do some ski trips every once in a while to de-stress. Do some Tahoe trips.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it is basically a very stressful thing. It's I always tell people you have to. I mean, it depends how you run your startup. You can run your startup as bootstrap, or you can do more raising money traditionally, going to the VCs. If you're lucky, you can get venture capitalists, right?
Right.
And trying to get to the top of the mountain to basically compete. So that's one way, but then you're taking the elevator. You're taking the easy way, because you're going to have all this money and you're going to spend it, right? So you have to be very careful about how do you manage your cash and how you manage your capital. You can take the other road, basically, or other path, which is much more difficult. You climb the mountain, which means you have to bootstrap it. But the advantage of that, it might take you longer, but the strength you gain when you get there,
I'm going to
it's
agree
amazing.
with you on that one.
It's amazing. So the journey for us has been a lot of fun, and we haven't been restricted in terms of we have to have our people in Silicon Valley or in San Francisco. We're basically a distributed team all over the world, and we have to learn how to collaborate with each other. So for us, integrity and basically autonomy, that kind of culture is very, very important for a startup.
I agree.
Yeah.
How do you guys celebrate, like within the teams, when you guys have a win?
Well, when we have a win, we basically get together, either in Europe. We got together in Lviv in Europe, and we basically go out and celebrate the win that we have. We have several wins, like when we launch our product. And the other one would be everybody celebrates because we've got revenue and we've got growth and we've got profitability, right? So people get rewarded for that as well. Yeah, I mean, there's different way we're celebrating. Right now, we're hitting a milestone. Actually, we're thinking in August and September to celebrate here in the Bay Area,
Wow.
and take them around maybe Napa or, we took them to Napa as well, the Napa tour.
I'm jealous right now.
That was very nice. And also, we've been thinking about, renting a private yacht around the Bay Area starting from Alameda,
So follow-up question, are you guys hiring?
Yes, we are. We are hiring, yes. We're hiring basically from software developer, marketing, email marketing, PR. I mean, we've got. If you look at our website, we've got few, positions open. We do have a dedicated recruiter, even in-house recruiter for recruiting people.
Awesome.
And
Wonderful. Yeah. So you mentioned
send me your resume. So no, just
we'll have all of the links for jobs available later up in the chat. I think Nikki will have some of that. But
I'll post it.
We heard a lot about the journey, pros and cons of bootstrapping a business. But being able to fundraise is its own beast entirely, as I'm sure you have had to deal with constantly.
Oh, yeah.
So what are specific tips you can give other founders that are looking to bootstrap? What are lessons you may have learned, or just more broadly, what has the fundraising process looked like when you're sort of riding excitement around a technology as interesting as blockchain?
Yeah, that's a fair question. I would say when you're raising capital, just a few basic things. be sure to get warm intros. You know, as much as Silicon Valley likes to kind of hype up the, you know, we like the hustler who will just like, you know, wait out in the lobby and wait for a partner to speak to them or reach out to them on Twitter. At the end of the day, a warm intro is going to be so much more effective. So kind of get out there, meet people, know people, try to build a network. And, you know, inevitably one of these people is going to, you know, find the right fit for you. You know, actually for OpenToken, it was kind of an interesting story because at the time I was working at a VC firm, Andreessen Horowitz, and I was building a side project that ended up being OpenToken, where, you know, it was for myself, right? It was like, okay, I kind of want to participate in these things, but it's very difficult to do so. These ICOs is very difficult to do so.
Yeah.
So I just built a tool to be able to do it. And then a friend of mine actually introduced me to our lead investor, who was not a part of my network at the time, even though I was, you know, at a VC firm. And we ended up talking. We had like a 2-hour-long meeting or something like that. And then, you know, eventually that converted to our first check. And it was, you know, very fortuitous, completely unexpected. But, you know, you never know. You never know what's going to happen. And the stronger network you build, the more likely, you know, one of those things is going to happen.
I agree with that.
Yeah, one rule I would say for people who are raising money, especially, it's a very tough to raise money because it's almost a full-time job, right? Mm-hmm. You're out there and pivoting and basically selling your story, but you have to be prepared for rejection. Pretty much,
Absolutely.
There's going to be a lot of rejections. The other thing you have to be prepared for, people are going to be very rude to you. Sometimes some of the VCs, they will tell you things that you don't like, basically. You're out of your mind, you're crazy, this is not the right idea. So, I mean, if you
That's
believe...
how you know you're on the right track, though.
And those are the good ones. They'll speak their mind. A lot of these people will think it, but they
Yeah,
actually
I mean, you
won't
would
say
not
it.
believe what I got. I mean, it's fine. But the best approach is really you have to have a confidence, but at the same time, be prepared to turn down the offers, basically. Don't be very desperate about raising money. So you have to be very, very secure about yourself and very confident about yourself that you're going to proceed to the next level. And obviously, the best leads would be the leads who come to you. So right now, like we have venture capitalists that are actually reaching out to us. So that's the best position to be in, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Once you have momentum, you know,
then it's
easier to
easier.
win once you're already winning,
Yes.
right? So what are some of the examples of challenges you faced while bootstrapping your business? Like, we know that it takes maybe longer without that rocket fuel of venture capital, but were there particular points in time where it felt very long, where like progress was slow in the beginning?
Well, it was very painful in the beginning, and painful in terms of, I mean, one of the things is the fuel, the cash you have, and you have a cash flow, right? And the fuel, you're saying you're going to have a goal like there, right? But you don't know whether you're going to have a gas station or a charging station. It depends what you're driving. You're driving a Tesla or you're driving a gas car. So you have to ensure that you have enough cash flow to get to your goal. And it's very frustrating sometimes when you don't get to your goal and say, well, gee, now I don't have enough cash to get me through. So it's really your fuel. And basically also it's the challenge is to find the right developers and the right people to really execute your vision, to bring you to the next level. The other thing could be is a disappointment, is in the path is you're thinking, okay, you're going to build this product and you're going to get the momentum, and then surprises. Oh my God, I'm not getting the revenue. I'm not getting this. Now I need more money. I need more fuel. So I would say be prepared for that. You have to constantly have that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So
Time is the most valuable thing.
it is. The time is more valuable, and at the same time, you have to manage your cash flow. I mean, that's the most challenging things. I mean, in the .com, this is not my first startup. I've done others. And .com, we were very spoiled in '90. I mean, it's like I was told by venture capitalists, don't worry about the money. Think about the money. It's always there. That's how crazy it was.
Seriously?
Yeah, seriously. That was the .com.
I missed it.
Yeah, you missed it.
Everything.
You missed it. It's like, don't worry about it. Just scale. And then you
wish someone
scale
told
the
me
scale.
that.
Then the .com crash came in, right? And boom, you're bust.
That's it. No one has any money.
Yeah, but we have the unicorn too these days, right?
And a dragon.
Yeah, and a dragon, right. And the other thing is the value also, the company value. A lot of people come to me and say, well, look at this company. They are on NASDAQ. They basically have whatever it is, $600 million of market cap. But you look at how much money they raised. They raised over $600 million. I say, okay, what is the value here? What is exactly the return of investment for the investors? It's nothing. When you look at us right now, the original investor, we just got few offers. We're actually at 20x ROI
Wow.
for our
That's
investors.
incredible.
So
Yeah.
That's like a huge win.
it's a huge win. So
And
it depends what level of win you want to have.
Yeah, and I don't think it's completely binary, right? Like there are lots of examples of companies who have gone midway through, their lifespan
Yes,
and
yes.
bought back equity and control of their company so that they can sort of have the best of both worlds, right? Like maybe get venture capital in the beginning to be able to catalyze this whole process, but then midway through realize, all right, well, the way we see this product going is different from what our investors see, and sometimes you can necessarily keep your product the same, but pivot the way you want to run from like a cash flow perspective. So it's not necessarily one or the other, right? But
No, I agree. I mean, it depends on the product. It depends on the company. I mean, for some company, bootstrapping makes a lot of sense, and some other. In our case, it made sense for us not to take any money from venture capitalists because OpenVPN. I don't know how much you know about OpenVPN. It's pretty much the standard right now. It's becoming the de facto standard in the industry. I mean, many companies have deployed OpenVPN. Google have deployed OpenVPN. We've got, we get about 1 million downloads per month. I mean, it's huge, So it's very hard to really compete against that. It's very hard.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got a number of companies. I shouldn't name them. They raised money. They raised over hundreds of millions of dollars to compete with us. They took our open source, but they can't. They always come back to us. I mean, we've got companies who've raised beyond $300 million and took open source trying to compete in the same space. And the answer I give them is to say, why? I say, well, because money can't buy you love. So it's simple as that. Sometimes money is not everything either.
I mean, that's a fair point. Like you brought up like VC venture capital being kind of like a rocket ship. It'll kind of help you propel your company forward very, very quickly. But, I think, the truth is that most companies probably don't need venture capital. And if you can bootstrap a company, then, honestly, that's more often than not the ideal way to go.
The best way to go.
Yeah,
for
one
sure.
rule, one thing I learned is raise money when you don't need it.
That's interesting.
You're more likely to get term sheets that way.
Yeah.
or better deals on how far the money will go
Yeah.
as far as equity.
What is the biggest challenge you guys have faced so far? Is it this pivot? Is it something else early on?
Yeah, there were several challenges. I would say this pivot is kind of up there in terms of like having to take a step back and think through kind of restarting, like doing a lot of the things that we did before all over again.
Yep.
On the one hand, like it's a little demoralizing, but on the other hand, like it's a new opportunity to kind of rethink the business, kind of relearn a lot of things, use the knowledge that we've kind of gained from the previous experience, and keep on building from there. So this time around, like hopefully it can be better, it can be faster, we can iterate faster, things like that.
When do you expect the new pivoted product to launch or see the market for the first time?
Okay, so we're doing a soft launch right now. Like you can
Soft
play around with the application actually, if you're interested.
I am.
So yeah,
Dozens of active users. Yeah, we're like testing various marketing strategies right now and not spending very much money. So we're sort of like seeing what works. And like Dan said, we're not 100% sure exactly what kind of product we're building and exactly what kind of user we want. So right now we're still sort of like figuring out who we want to market to, and then once we have a better idea of that, then we'll spend the budget that we've set aside for that sort of thing, aggressively getting people on the platform. Hopefully there's like a network effect because it's exactly the kind of product that would benefit from many people at once.
yeah.
So where would I go to play with
It's
said
called
product?
hunches.app.
Hunches.app.
HUNCHES. Hunches.
Hunches.
Like a detective
Yeah.
is like, oh, he's got a hunch.
So something that Michael mentioned was, like just kind of iterating, trying to find the right kind of people to potentially advertise to. And I think like one of the important things for startups early on, and I think that this is kind of where crypto, could, use a little bit of help. And I think that it's like the mentality that they're kind of, evolving towards now, which is trying to find what works fast iterative testing, trying to find product market fit, making the dApp network, the dApp ecosystem useful for a lot of people, and seeing making sure that they're building products that people actually want, so that they're solving needs that people have, as opposed
Right.
to over engineering, designing for what they think people want,
Or just trying to use the blockchain.
or just trying to use the blockchain for X. Yeah.
Yep, blockchain for X.
Yeah, there's so many really incredible ideas out there and complicated projects that have been funded. And what I want, though, as just a creator of a startup that would like to be paid, I want a mechanism for accepting deposits that's easier for people to use than credit cards, but doesn't have transaction fees and doesn't have as much regulatory baggage. Like, I'm all for things like protecting against fraud and protecting people against themselves, but I think credit cards, because they've been around for so long and because they're attached to credit, are not a great payment mechanism for early companies. So ideally, it would be super easy for our users to just send us money using cryptocurrency. But for whatever reason, it doesn't seem like there have been many successful efforts in making cryptocurrency widely usable as a form of payment. And of course, there are blockchains that have established themselves as this is a payment-oriented chain, and there are layers sitting on top of existing chains like Bitcoin that are payment mechanisms. But for whatever reason, they don't seem to be as successful in raising money as the visionary databases or fundamental innovations in just consensus or something. I want to focus on the stuff that'll help me, like payments.
So it's actually harder to ICO than people might think it is basically.
Oh no, I mean it's harder. I just want cryptocurrency deposits on the site, and it's hard to use Bitcoin. So give me a cryptocurrency that's super easy to use, like a credit card.
Yeah. So it might have been easy to ICO at one point in time. Now it's hard to ICO for an entirely different reason. People realize that, maybe the class of companies that ICO'd back in 2017 probably weren't the best investments. But there's an entirely separate matter of companies not necessarily getting adoption as quickly as we would have liked.
Yeah. And so there are these huge opportunities you mentioned for something you'd love to be able to use, and you sort of only realize that once you try to build out your own platform and realize sort of the holes and gaps in the industry. Are there any particular entrepreneurs, either in your space or not, that you feel like you've learned from, you've looked up to, or you kind of just lean on for advice from time to time?
And why?
Well, I mean, I've had advisor and entrepreneur, and also who built companies probably beyond $1 billion, and also I've had advisors who failed. So basically, I would say I've learned more from failure than actually success in a lot of different areas. So I mean, I would say the attribute of an entrepreneur you have to have is really, I would say, losers, they quit when they fail, but winners fail until they succeed. So that is true. I mean, you will not expect the first idea is good. You're into this mode of reinventing and figuring out this, right? Because it's going to take a lot of failures before you get there. So a lot of my advisors, I've learned from them, from their failure, in terms of basically some of them, they raised too much money. For instance, that's one of the things where I saw where their company, I mean, they were making $200, $300 million a year in revenue, but the problem that they had in their balance sheet is their valuation was not there, and they were not very well positioned to the IPO. The other thing I learned, necessarily, its IPO might not be a good idea. Yep. I've learned from another failure who they raised about $30 million, again, another advisor, and they went into this, what they call it, the pink sheet, on the counter. It was a disastrous for them. They were there, right? I mean, because the cost of basically that they have, and so they went bankrupt. But so all these different advice I've got, really, but the best advice I got, believe it or not, is from the person who raised a lot of money, who raised actually $50 million.
And what was the advice?
And the advice: do not raise money from venture capitalists. Don't raise money. And guess what? Now, actually, he's still running the company. And our revenue is probably 10x more than their revenue.
Wow. Because you did not raise venture capital.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say just because of that, but thanks to our open source and the community we have and the ecosystem we have around us, basically. So.
Yeah, so, I I mean, all of our investors are very helpful for advice. Like I would say, we talked a little bit about, trying to not raise when you didn't need to raise. But, on the other hand, like, investors, they see a lot of companies, and if you're lucky enough, you'll get an investor entrepreneur who has been through the entire gamut before. So, in particular, Kevin Hartz from Eventbrite, Joey Krug from Augur have been kind of really helpful in, especially, when we're facing difficult situations, just giving us good advice and, kind of how to handle the situations.
So we're reaching towards the end now, so I want to ask you guys, like, are you hiring? If so, what roles are you hiring for, and what would be your stack? And then what final advice would you give future entrepreneurs out there who are just starting to think about starting an idea?
Well, sorry.
I'm going to write the links in chat,
Okay,
by the way.
so actually, if you go to openvpn.net and under jobs, we have few positions open in different area, both the UI and the UI development, mostly React, and as well we have native applications. So the app developers for the mobile and the desktop, Windows and Mac, and also we're looking for the backend developer, Java developer, database. And we have also some marketing position opens as well, email marketing and PR positions. So those are the positions that we have.
Openvpn.net, right?
Openvpn.net, or you can do openvpn.com and redirect directly to openvpn.net as well.
And I know you mentioned that your team is pretty distributed geographically. So are those remote available jobs?
Absolutely, they are. It doesn't matter whether it's in Pleasanton or remote. Basically, we have the philosophy: if you cannot work in a distributed way, and if you can't basically somehow feel you are part of the team, we're actually just launching our own internal magazine, which is basically it's going to be a yearly for all our employees to make them feel that they're part of the team. So we have meetings, we have all these collaborations. So definitely for us, the person doesn't have to be in Pleasanton or it could be in Ukraine. As a matter of fact, we have a project that's very distributed. So a team lead, he's in Netherlands, while the other person in the same team is in Germany, and then we have a couple of people in Ukraine, and then one person here in Pleasanton. But they are working on this same project.
Wow.
So,
That's awesome.
So the advice I would give, to the entrepreneur, basically look for the best. And don't be very picky about the geographical location there that you're going to build your team. Think about that way rather than saying restricting yourself, because Silicon Valley is very expensive after all, right?
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. I mean, in Ukraine, you can hire 3-4 engineers for the price of in the Silicon, and they are very, very good actually. So look outside the Silicon Valley. Look outside the U.S. as well.
Yeah, we're also hiring. We don't have a hiring page, but if you just send your information, resume, or just like contact us at, I guess, Michael at hunches.app or Daniel at hunches.app, or like founders also works, and it'll go to all of us. So we're mainly looking for front-end engineers who are interested in doing design and React coding. So we have like a very UX-oriented approach to the product, meaning that for us the most important thing is that the product should be easy to use, and that's what we think differentiates us from our competitors. So the problem though is that like I am not great at design, and so Dan has been doing all the hard work, and Dan has other stuff to do. So yeah, we would like to hire somebody who's a good front-end engineer, but also exceptional at design. We're also looking for back-end engineers. This is like a longer term process. Like I mentioned before, we have like this Django stack, so it should be all stuff that you're fairly familiar with. And I think Python's a super easy language to learn, so don't be scared by it being Django. It's like, it takes a couple days to learn. But yeah, probably longer term we'll hire like marketing people, but right now I think we're good.
Yeah, and it's mostly just like smart engineers who want to work on a, small, fast evolving startup.
There's no like specific requirements on like years of experience or.
No, I don't care. I mean, I'm gonna like, you're gonna do.
I have some personal recommendations that I'd like to make.
Yeah, from my previous company, I learned this hiring process that I thought was really cool. We do this thing called a micro internship as sort of like the cap before we hire, and I think it's exceptionally good for very small companies. Like a large company wouldn't be able to afford to do this, but basically we just pay the person to work for us as an employee for 2 days, and during the 2 days we give them a project project which we actually want done and will use and deploy. So they're working in our code base, sitting next to us on production code, and hopefully by the end of it we ship it and people actually use it. And the goal with this is like we get a sense of who they are and how they work, and they get a sense obviously of who we are, and they're seeing our day-to-day and so forth, and they see
That
our
literally
code.
was my company.
Is building micro internships.
I called it job shadowing, but
Oh, yeah.
same concept, say exactly what you described.
It's a great idea. Yeah, you don't need a startup, no offense to do it. You just
Nope.
bring them on site and hopefully have your COO or whatever like do the paperwork. But maybe that's the tricky part. But yeah, like just give them something to do, come up with something. I don't want my interviewee to be like, I don't know, inverting a binary tree or whatever. Like I want them to do something related to what they're actually going to
Totally.
be doing.
Got you. Well, thank you guys so much for being on the show today. Just to cap it, we had Francis from OpenVPN, and we had Dan and Michael from OpenToken. Please join us tomorrow. We will be streaming all day from Santa Clara for the AWS Santa Clara Summit, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.